An early and significant audio memory I have occurred when I received my March 1982 issue of Audio magazine. Fastened to the inside of the magazine was a flimsy but playable Carver Sonic Holography test disc. I was so impressed by the sonic holographic effect that I gave the record to the professor I was doing my senior project with, Dr. William Kerwin, the K in the KHN biquad active filter, for just a little bit of trivia. He was similarly impressed with the effect. Fast forward about 40 years when I decided to put together a two-channel system to power my venerable Klipsch industrial La Scalas. I remembered there were some Carver preamps with sonic holography and settled on a C1, which I purchased from eBay. Aside from some scratchy volume controls and tone controls and balance controls, the preamp worked fine after treating with deoxit. But after a year, I decided that I really needed to have a remote control to change the volume, mute the volume, as well as turn on the sonic holography function. It was difficult to rely on my sonic memory to get up and down to switch the sonic holography on and off and notice the effect. So I was off looking at Carver Sonic Holography preamps with a remote and found and purchased a circa 1991 Carver PSC60. It's a tuner preamp, and I also got that from eBay. The PSC60 is also identical to the Carver CT6, other than the name on the front, as far as I can tell, as they both use the same service manual. If you know the difference, please leave a comment below as to what that difference may be, and I would appreciate it. It turns out that there is a reputable place that can rebuild your C1 as well as install a motorized volume control. Nelion Audio, which I will provide a link for below, does that. And also, while I'm mentioning links, for all things Carver, there is a great website forum, the Carversite.com, and for just sonic holography, there is a Facebook page for that, and I will provide the links below. Unfortunately, the speaker room situation where the PSC60 was being used did not lend itself to sonic holography very well. I was able to control my volume and mute it, but it was not going to do what I really wanted to in that room. The C1 pretty much sat on a shelf in the garage until I needed it for some bench testing. After I retired, I decided it would be fun to do what I call a partial buildy mod on the Carver C1 and replace all the capacitors in it except for the ones on the phono loading circuitry, which I didn't see any need in doing because I don't use the phono stages very much. I am pretty sure I will do a video on the performance of the C1 in more detail one day. Anyway, I needed a preamp to hook up to a power amp I just purchased and cleaned up, and the C1 fit the bill nicely. I had the C1 sitting on the table here and hooked up to a CD player, and I could adjust the volume, and at some point I decided to switch in the sonic holography, and that was during Santana's Oye Como Va. And wow, it made a huge difference in the soundstage. My interest in sonic holography had been reawakened. For me, the soundstage went from this wide to this wide. I would like to also point out that my reference system is not optimized for sonic holography as shown in either preamp's owner's manual. Carver does give a really good pointers on how to set up your speakers in your room to get the best sonic holography experience. So now I needed to get a tuner with sonic holography for my reference system. My concern is that the C1 has two holographic modes and that the Carver remote controlled preamps don't. They just have a sonic holography on and off switch. What I wanted to do was compare the sound of the C1 with that of the PSC60. Before I get any further, let's have a look at these preamps. The PSC60 is the thinner one on the bottom. From above, the view looks like this. The C1 is thicker and not nearly as deep a unit. And here are the two units from the rear. The C1 has a lot more going on with it, primarily moving magnet and moving coil phono inputs, though I converted the moving coil input into a line input. It also has two preamp outputs. One of them has a bit more gain than the other one, although you can adjust the gains to match if you would like. The C1 also has more tone controls and options for the sonic holography. The PSC60 has a built-in AM/FM tuner and fewer AC switched and unswitched outlets. With all that in mind, I put together an A/B testing setup to compare the two preamp sounds. The block diagram is seen here. Sometime around 1989, I bought the Pierre Verani CD test disc because I thought it would be a good idea to have. It has several tones recorded on it, and I played the 1 kilohertz tone through the CD player into both preamps, adjusting one's volume control to provide the same reading on the realistic 33-2050 sound pressure level meter. Once it was all set up, all I had to do was switch between the inputs on the Nokia AV switch, which is this little booger. Hopefully it turns out well. And here's the rear. It does not require power to operate, just the audio. So I set the preamp controls for both of them being flat and set the volume controls for a decent listening level. I spent the next 2 hours or so listening to different music and switching between preamps. I could not hear a difference between the two preamps at all. None whatsoever. There was a difference between the holographic effects, namely that they each had a slightly different tone to them, and there were slightly different volume levels, which I would expect to hear based on their circuitry, but they both had a widened holographic soundstage. I would give it the slight edge to the C1 because it does have a few more settings for sonic holography. Once I completed my listening test, I decided to set up my QA402 analyzer and look at both of the paths that each preamp went through from the CD player. I wanted to see how close I got using the sound pressure level meter. The PSC60 shows a level of 206 and 237 millivolts for the 1 kilohertz 0 dBV signal, while the C1's level for the same signal was 232, 248 millivolts. So I guess I did fairly good. The C1, which has been recapped, does have a better THD plus noise, but both have extremely low THDs. Next, I ran a frequency response for the C1 path, which shows a channel separation of about half a dB between the two channels and a frequency response flatness of 0.9 dB. For the PSC60, we have a frequency response of less than 0.7 dB across the band and a worst case channel separation of 1.6 dB. To be honest, I should have done this to start with instead of using the SPL test CD method, and I could have balanced the channels a bit better, but this is how I did it. And this way I got to use my 34-year-old Pierre Verani test CD. And I don't think it would have made that much difference to the listening tests. I probably will cover each of the preamps in a separate video on their own, but the main purpose of this was just how to compare two preamps and hopefully see that there really isn't a lot of difference. So there are a lot of things I hope you take away from this video. The first would be that if you have an opportunity to listen to a setup with a Carver Sonic Holographic preamp in it, do so. It does not work with all music, and you have to have speakers set up in a decent method. And the Carver manuals do give quite a detailed description of how to do it, but it will make a lasting impression on you, or at least it did on me. The second item was just how I did a simple A/B test setup. Yeah, I could have done some things to improve it a bit, but for what I was doing, it was real simple to switch between the two preamps, and for a long time, and I just didn't really hear much difference. And it's not because I'm older and my hearing may not be as good. I hope that my little A/B setup, while not the best in the world, does give an idea of what you might be able to do your own testing. It works great with preamps. Other things, it's not going to handle amplifiers or speakers, but for preamps it's great. Once again, I thank you for stopping by, and I look forward to any comments you may leave below, as well as if you like what you're seeing, subscribe, as it gives me motivation to do more videos, and I'll try to get a little bit more animated when I do them. Once again, thank you and have a great day or night.